Now for chapter 4 and 5 of The Beej by Ninja Brian. Chapter 4. Slowly, yet violently, Brian placed his perfectly manicured right hand on the sheet covering Danny and ripped it off the bed, throwing it so hard that it landed in a perfectly folded pile next to the extensive collection of erotic grease and sculpture Brian acquired on one of his many all-expense-paid trips to Europe. Brian squirted an inappropriately large amount of lotion onto his velvety, crabby hands. Danny softly moaned with anticipation, boredom, or one of the many other irrelevant and uninteresting emotions. Danny, Brian brusquely slapped his lotion-filled hands onto Danny's hairy, unflattering thighs, and slowly began to rub in small circular motions, while whispering the lyrics to Journey's "Any Way You Want It," which Brian had ghost written by himself with no help. How could his legs be hairy if they were cleanly shaven, as Brian had already mentioned in chapter 3? As Danny's thighs got moister and moister, Brian's hands worked their way up onto Danny's poorly maintained man bush. And just as Brian was about to take a one-way trip to Sacktown, he paused. "It's time," screamed Brian, slamming his mouth onto Danny's erect and unimpressive penis. Danny passed out from pleasure/terror/nobody cares. And so it began. Chapter 5. 10.3 million years later, Danny awoke on the surface of Grobinius 4 in the #butt system. Robot Brian was asleep on top of him, his metal mouth surrounding Danny's still erect penis, and still erect and still not very impressive dick. "What happened?" Danny asked, stupidly, scratching his dumb face. Where are we?" Robot Brian awoke with a start and began to speak in a metallic, commanding voice, not unlike that of a young Benedict Cumberbatch if he had been a robot or whatever. "Danny, many eons have now passed since I first began to beej you. As you may well imagine, the beej started out amazingly. Although you were asleep, your body was racked with pleasure as my human mouth began to expertly work its way around your pallid, distasteful groin. I did everything a man could do to another man, including stuff I had to look up online because I had never heard of it because it was so gross. And despite all my mouth efforts, you slept. Cities rose and fell, and you slept. All human consciousness was uploaded to a vast database, and our bodies were replaced by superior synthetic ones, and still you slept. And even once I had robot hands and used them to rub you all over, especially in ways I know you would not have been cool with if you had been awake. Still, you slept. As Earth blew up for some reason, I carried you to the final escaping starship, my mouth all the while on your disgusting wiener, and took you here to the most distant human colony. As I continued to work you over, you still you slept, and gradually, after every other member of the human race had gone, the pace at my mouth was bobbing up and down on your eager, boring shaft slowed, and then I slept." Robot Brian paused and stood. "And now," said Robot Brian, metal hands held aloft in triumph, I shall finish you off. Danny grasped in pleasure or something as Robot Brian threw himself towards Danny's gross junk. Using exactly the perfect amount of mouth friction, Robot Brian brought Danny to a brisk to the brink of ecstasy, and then stopped, and once again stood. Just kidding, bro, laughed Robot Brian. I'd never give you a real beej. Beej. That's gross. High five. As Robot Brian reached his hand for an amazing high five, Danny died, and the human race died with him. Well, that wasn't very cool of him, thought Robot Brian to himself as he began masturbating to the sunset. That wasn't cool at all. The end. Hold on. This is exactly what I expected from the Game Grumps. Okay. Well, I'd have to say that this is officially 50 times better than 50 Shades of Grey. I'm gonna be honest here. And, if for some stupid fucking reason the Game Grumps watched both part 1 and 2 of this, I am not sorry.